person, and Justice Yusuf Saeed have really said a lot of things. One of our most dynamic and innovative judges in the court, and I think it's a true privilege. I think they're the future of this country with such innovation and energy that they bring to the court and to the jurisprudence. I'm really very happy that they're there. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your generous words that you talked about jurisprudence and mentioned me once in a while. Thank you for that. Let me just start off by first thanking Justice Arif Khilji, who's here, my senior, somebody who I've learned a lot from. Thank you for being here, sir. It is an honor that you're sitting in the and listening to all this. Thank you so much. And he runs a fascinating legal aid center society is it, which is doing wonderful work, and I had a chance to visit that day today. Let me just, there are two components what I want to say. One is some of the suggestions and recommendations to Dr. Hussain, if I could take the liberty of doing that, because like other speakers have said, we just got introduced to OIC the last 2 days. I mean, I didn't know of OIC-AC, and I've just found out thanks to Awaz also. But I've been thinking about it, some recommendations from Pakistan that you can carry, and I'll just talk about that, and a little about Pakistan's landscape on ADR, just briefly. Starting off from what Shiraz said very rightly, perhaps OIC-AC would be a unique center which has a conglomeration behind it of 57 countries. I mean, I don't know of any center in the world which has an international treaty which has 57 or any number of countries, saying that our disputes will go to a particular center. I think you cannot just stop working. I think there should be so much work, so much traffic in this center that Dr. Hussaini will probably get old very quickly. I mean, that's how I would imagine. So my humble recommendation would be that I think as a first step, the countries will have to put down their foot together. I mean, I see all these flags, but I'm not aware whether the countries are talking to each other. These 57 countries are talking to each other. We don't know what areas of trading that we do. I think OIC-AC needs to put this booklet together, have this communication and conversation between 57 countries, and Pakistan ought to own it. I mean, our problems or our disputes ought to go to OIC-AC. Has to be some sort of a commitment reiterated. I understand that OIC-AC has been reignited and revitalized recently, and so it's great. I mean, and I think your leadership is amazing, but I think this 57 countries need to come together at some forum and talk about it and reassure their people and their companies. I think the companies operating in these 57 countries need to come together and look at each other. I don't even know what companies are operating, what areas of trading do we do in these 57 countries. So I think it's a unique opportunity that a center has behind it through international agreement or treaty, 57 countries. So I think that would be one. The next thing I would request you is that I think the judiciaries of these 57 countries ought to have some sort of a conversation. I have no idea. I mean, I see all these flags, and I haven't met a single judiciary from these countries. We need to understand their landscape. We need to understand their arbitration landscape. We need to understand their ADR, whether they're with it or not. And I think there will be a great learning otherwise also if the 57 judiciaries of Islamic countries come together and talk about ADR and talk about arbitration. There will be so much energy that they can bring. So I think my humble recommendation would be that I think OIC-AC ought to get this thing going, judiciaries in the countries and the major corporations talking to each other so they know where to take their disputes. And somebody asked a wonderful question whether at all the agreements talk about OIC-AC, the trading agreements or the bilateral agreements, and I think sooner or later they need to start mentioning that the center is there. So that's one. Number two, I think how we could benefit, we would benefit if we come to Turkey to see how your center is first. But more importantly, I think you do a lot of training, I hear, and we've been talking about it. And let me tell you that Dr. Hussaini and I got along very well. And I think we just met briefly, and we've been talking about a number of possibilities and prospects in future. So I think one thing we can do is immediately is you have a good faculty, and you've been training people on mediation and arbitration, and also prevention and mitigation, which is your new idea. So I think we could start training our judges at the Federal Judicial Academy And that kind of an understanding could be reached immediately, and we could get started on a training program. So that's the energy we can get from you. And then we, as far as Pakistan's landscape is concerned, I just want to quickly share. Just as Jawad Hassan has already mentioned all the benefits of it, we are scrapping the 1940 law and coming up with a new arbitration law, a much needed exercise, should have been done much earlier, but it's never too late. The draft has been given to the federal government, and they are in the process of coming up with it. Dynamic team at the Supreme Court committee, which had Justice Mr. Makhdoom and Faisal Naqvi and some of the other dynamic people who got together and came up with a draft, and that draft has been handed over to the federal government, and I think it should come out soon. That actually, the benefits have already been counted, so I don't want to repeat. I think that is perhaps one of the most latest laws on arbitration in the country. I think that will change how Pakistan operates, because currently, if I were to go under 1940 Act, I litigate twice. I go into arbitration and then I go to court. So that's foolish, actually makes no sense. So glad that it's going to go and we'll have a new landscape. But what I want to say quickly, just 2 or 3 points, I think a change of mindset is required on behalf of the lawyers, and the lawyers ought to send that awareness out to people that in Pakistan we just have one singular road leading to courts. That has to be dispelled. Everybody, if anybody has a dispute in this room, all you think is rushing to a court. That has to go. Courts come at the last end, you see. Maybe they don't come into your life anymore. You need to start thinking that courts are not the places where you'll take your disputes, but you'll negotiate them first, you'll mediate them second, you'll arbitrate them third, and then maybe we go to courts. That's the kind of mindset you need to bring in, please, because with 2.4 million cases in Pakistan and the sluggish system of one generation passing through deciding cases, I think it's absolutely essential for us to walk out of this and think of all these other options. I mean, if you want to go sit in a court for 20 years, good luck to you. You probably love courts that much, but the point is get out of it and think of all these other options which are available. So I think in future, please start thinking that dispute settlement has many roads now, and it's not only the courts. Also, do not think of an alternative dispute resolution as a separate concept which is on the side somewhere. No, it is a mainstream justice system requirement. And once you all the lawyers should have that on their table. If there is a problem, let's negotiate, let's mediate, let's arbitrate. And I think you got to get yourself trained in that. That's the future. Anybody who's not going through mediation training or negotiation training or arbitration training will lose out. I think the future is going to move in that direction. People are sick and tired of litigation. Please try to understand. I'm sure we all connect on this point. It cannot be that you sit in for 30 years and get matters decided. So that is one mindset that we need to bring in. Secondly, I think when we talk about right to access to justice, it is very much a right to access to justice to go to mediation. It is very much a right to access to go to arbitration. So our traditional notion of right to access to justice is only to rush to courts is not correct. I think the new judicial system that we must have in mind is that we have all these options available to us, and we must do that. I'd also earlier, and something very close to what Dr. Hosseini had said about prevention and mitigation, something perhaps similar, which suggested that it's about time, if there are companies sitting here, it's about time that you have an in-house ADR center, please. This is how the world is moving. People in various countries, the companies have their own ADR system, a panel inside, which could possibly look at this mitigation and prevention thing within the system. In their model, they go tell you what the prevention mitigation is. I would imagine make them self-sustainable, you see. Let the companies have an ADR system within. Try to resolve your disputes first, and if it doesn't work, then it comes out to a private arbitration center or court and wherever it has to go, and then maybe leads to litigation if at all. So that's another suggestion, that please, all the organizations, corporations, companies must start thinking of having their own ADR panels within and resolve their disputes, and that's something akin to something with Dr. Hussaini's idea of prevention mitigation, because we should just avoid that. So, and lastly, I would say that the Supreme Court with the ADR initiative, our initiative with the Supreme Court is court-annexed ADR, and that has a reason. We have litigation pending, which is about 2 million cases in the district courts. So our best model would be that in every district, which is 138 districts in the country, we have an ADR center. And we try to migrate those cases onto the center. I say that because there is examples, and while I was at Lahore, we did an example of this, and about more than 30 to 40,000 cases migrated in about 9 months from regular courts. So series of areas in which this migration is possible. So the judiciary is going to go as a first cut for ADR, court-annexed ADR. And we are setting up our first, inshallah, model ADR center at the Islamabad district courts, and we want to run it and establish it and then scale it all the way across the country. I think that migration is much needed. Many cases are just sitting there unnecessarily being for adjudication. They're not required and they need to move. And I think once we sort of do this first tier at the district level, I think the similar center like in Delhi High Court and others could be at the High Courts. Islamabad High Court has already taken initiative in that. So we could do the High Courts and then eventually the Supreme Court. And I think ADR is the future, and I would urge the young lawyers sitting here to please seriously consider this as the future and as an avenue, and please get yourself trained in this area. With the help of Dr. Hussaini and OIC, AC, I'm sure we're going to have new programs in this area. And what's very interesting about OIC, AC is, which increasingly is actually, I'm sort of getting swayed and quite convinced, are the Islamic principles behind it, which makes it fascinating actually. As a personal growth that I've had in the last couple of months on this, I think Islamic principles are fascinating, of justice, of finance, of settlement, and I think we should head in that direction, and that could really change the landscape that we are in. And we need to get rid of all this 2.4 million cases if possible by coming up with all these avenues and making life easier for people, because you can't be stuck in courts for 20 years. You need to go do what you're supposed to be doing. A doctor has to get back and do his profession and attend to his profession. Businesses have to get back to their businesses. You can't be stuck in courts for 20 years, for God's sake. Not possible. So it requires a change of mindset, and I hope there is more awareness and there's more social media on this so people understand that we need to come up with these avenues. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.